One of the first things that visitors to Historic Jamestown see is this brick wall behind me, which encloses part of the churchyard. And if you look at it, it may not seem that particularly strange, but if you look a little closer, you'll notice a few things. First of all, it doesn't align with the church behind me. Secondly, if you extended the western wall, you'll see it actually goes right through the church and cuts off part of that eastern end. Lastly, if you really look at the brickwork, you'll notice that it doesn't conform to any consistent bond or patterning. And why is this? My name is Hartley with Jamestown Rediscovery, and today on Dig Deeper, we're going to look at some of the whys of the wall. Even after the capital moves from Jamestown to Williamsburg in 1699, the church continues to be active for many years afterwards. Governor Dinwiddie's term during 1751 to 1758 is actually when they build a new brick church on the mainland about 3 miles away from Jamestown. And this church replaces the church here within the James City Parish. Now, the reason for that is the island was becoming increasingly harder to access due to the rising tides and water, and also because the population here was dwindling. However, even after the church has come down and is deconsecrated and falls to ruin, several of the families that are local continue to use the graveyard. In his 1857 book, Old Churches, Ministers, and Families of Virginia, Bishop William Meade says that John Ambler and William Lee ordered the construction of this wall that you see today. The wall, built around the 1790s, was likely constructed by African American men enslaved by Ambler and Lee. Bishop Meade goes on to say that the bricks that they used to build the wall were taken and recycled from the ruins of the church, but also an older, larger brick enclosure. So far, our excavations out in this area have not revealed any evidence of that earlier wall. However, we do know that the cemetery extended further because we've found dozens of graves beyond the wall. Okay, I mentioned before that the churchyard wall does not align with the church, and that's most likely because the church is in ruins by this point, and it no longer is a dominant feature on the landscape. So most likely, Ambler and Lee chose to orient their wall with something that was a contemporary feature, maybe a well-traveled road that was close to the cemetery. Okay, the second thing that we notice is this western wall, if you extended it, would continue right through the church. And actually, when we were doing excavations inside the memorial church, we noticed that the churchyard wall actually cut right through the north and south foundations for the church. APVA's pioneering archaeologist Mary Jeffrey Gault concluded in her excavation report that once they saw the knight's tombstone and the stone for the minister in the chancel, they understood that this wall was likely meant to enclose and protect those stones within the churchyard. And that seems like a pretty reasonable explanation to us. Okay, now let's take a look at the fabric of the wall. What you can see above ground of this wall is mostly a reconstruction. There were several different periods of restoration starting in the 1890s when the Association for the Preservation of Virginia Antiquities, today Preservation Virginia, did the first restoration of the wall. The next restoration was done in 1971 and the most recent in 2019. And if we look really closely, you'll see that the mason that was working on different sections of the wall used different types of brick pattern, the way that the brick is laid. So you can see here, this is what's called stretcher bond on this western wall, and then on the north side they've switched and they're using stretchers then headers to lay out what's called Flemish bond. So because all of what you see is a recreation above ground, the only way we can see the original wall is by digging. Okay, I'm down in a test unit that we opened last summer where we've exposed a portion of the lower part of the cemetery wall, And what we noticed is that at the bottom base here, they have used English bond, which is alternating courses of headers and stretchers as they go up. And then right about this fourth or fifth course, you start to see where they're switching over to Flemish bond, which is alternating stretchers and headers on each course as you go up. And the reason they're doing that is Flemish bond is a lot more aesthetically pleasing. So you've got a strong base with the English bond, and then something that's really, really pleasing and decorative for the above ground structure. Okay, so in closing, there are a couple of other places where you can see both Flemish and English bond on the site. One of them is the Colonial Dames Gate, which we just had restored last year. And you can see they have Flemish bond here with stretchers and headers within one course. Header, stretcher. And a great place to see English bond is in our church tower right here with the stretchers and then headers alternating. Okay, we hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit more about the churchyard and the churchyard wall. And thank you for watching another episode of Dig Deeper.